Imagine you're standing on the edge of the airlock, looking out into a blackness so absolute it feels like a physical weight. You've been told about the vacuum, the radiation, and the freezing cold. You think you're prepared. But as the door slides open, the real killer isn't the void waiting for you. It's already inside. For 3 billion years, your body has been locked in a brutal, invisible war for survival on Earth. Every cell, every protein, and every white blood cell is a veteran of a battlefield governed by gravity and a thick protective atmosphere. But when you leave that cradle, the rules don't just change, they invert. We always talk about how space will crush us, freeze us, or radiation burn our DNA. But we rarely talk about the most terrifying betrayal of all, the moment your own immune system realizes you're in a place you were never meant to be and decides to stop fighting for you. This is the story of why your own biology is the ultimate gatekeeper of the stars. The traitorous immune system. While the competitor focuses on external threats like radiation and vacuum, it ignores the internal collapse of the human immune system. The law vault suggests that our immune systems significantly weaken in space, potentially allowing dormant infections to reawaken and attack the host from within. To understand why this happens, you have to look at your body not as a single entity, but as a walking, breathing fortress. Right now, as you sit on Earth, your immune system is an elite security force. It is constantly identifying, tagging, and neutralizing thousands of microscopic invaders. It is a highly coordinated strike force that has spent millions of years perfecting the art of survival on a planet with a magnetic field and 14.7 pounds of pressure per square inch. But when you cross the threshold into deep space, this elite force doesn't just get tired, it begins to mutiny. We have spent decades obsessing over the fast kills of the cosmos. We have mapped out exactly how the vacuum will boil the moisture on your tongue, or how the lack of pressure will foam your blood. We have measured the way galactic cosmic rays can shatter your DNA like a glass pane hit by a sledgehammer. But the real reason no one can survive deep space isn't just about what the universe does to you. It's about what your body does to itself when it realizes it is no longer at home. The sources reveal a terrifying biological reality that most documentaries completely ignore: the great silence of the human immune system. On Earth, your immune cells are in constant communication, a high-speed data network of chemical signals that keep the peace. But in the environment of deep space, that network goes dark. Studies of humans in space environments have shown that T cells, the generals of your internal army, don't activate the way they should. They become sluggish, confused, and in some cases they stop responding to threats entirely. This is where the traitor narrative becomes literal. You're not just a human in a suit, you are a biological host for trillions of organisms. Many of these are dormant. They are the sleeping giants of your own history. Viruses like herpes, Epstein-Barr, and varicella zoster, the virus that causes shingles. On Earth, your immune system keeps these viruses locked in a subterranean vault within your nerve cells. They are there, but they are powerless because your defenses are relentless. But deep space is the ultimate jailbreak. As your immune defenses weaken and the great silence sets in, these dormant infections sense the shift. They realize the guard is no longer at the door. In the isolated, high radiation environment beyond Earth's protection, these viruses begin to reawaken, They don't just return, they thrive in a body that has lost its ability to say no. Imagine being millions of miles from the nearest hospital, trapped in a thin-walled tin can, and your own body begins to break out in systemic viral flares that your medicine can't suppress because your biology has forgotten how to fight. This isn't just about getting a cold in space. It is about a fundamental biological mismatch between our evolution and the void. Your immune system isn't just a shield, it's a sensor. It knows when gravity is gone. It knows when the rhythm of Earth is missing. When those familiar cues vanish, the immune system undergoes a catastrophic internal collapse. Some cells become hyper-inflammatory, attacking your own healthy tissue in a confused attempt to find an enemy, while other critical cells simply give up. The sources point to a phenomenon where the internal stress of spaceflight, the combination of microgravity, radiation, and the crushing psychological weight of isolation creates a perfect storm for biological failure. You are essentially becoming a stranger to your own cells. The very system designed to keep you alive becomes the instrument of your decline. It ignores the cancerous mutations being triggered by cosmic rays and allows ancient, latent infections to ravage your organs from the inside out. This is what we call the internal vacuum. While we build better suits to keep the air in and better shields to keep the radiation out, we have no suit for the immune system. We have no engineering fix for the fact that human life is a localized phenomenon. We are a product of Earth-specific chemistry, pressure, and gravity. Deep space isn't just a place where we can't breathe, it's a place where our body's fundamental definition of self and other begins to blur and break. In the end, the real reason no one can survive deep space is that you cannot take Earth with you. You can take the air, the water, and the food, but you cannot take the millions of years of evolutionary stability that tell your immune system to keep the sleeping giants in their vault. When you venture into the deep, you are walking into the dark with a traitor in your chest, waiting for the moment the lights go out to finish what the vacuum started. This internal collapse is the silent barrier, the hard biological limit that suggests we were never meant to leave the cradle. While the vacuum attacks your lungs and the radiation attacks your DNA, it is the betrayal of your own immune system that ensures the journey into the void is a one-way trip. If you were floating in the absolute center of the great void, 3 million miles from the nearest planet, you would feel a strange, creeping sensation on the back of your neck. It wouldn't be a breeze and it wouldn't be a sound. It would be a feeling of being watched by the light itself. We have been taught to fear the things we can see, the blinding glare of the sun, the white-hot plasma of a solar flare, or the visible static of a dying star. We build our sensors to detect them, and we build our shields to deflect them. But imagine standing in a room where every alarm is silent, every gauge reads 0, and every sensor tells you that you're perfectly safe, while your very cells are being dismantled by a ghost. This is the terrifying reality of the unmeasurable flux. We have mapped the dangers we understand, but we have completely ignored the possibility that the most lethal part of deep space is the part we don't even have a name for yet. The unmeasurable flux. The competitor provides a detailed breakdown of known radiation, UV, cosmic rays. However, it completely ignores the theory of unknown forms of cosmic radiation that exist beyond our current ability to measure or detect. which could be causing damage we don't yet understand. When we talk about radiation in space, we usually talk about it like a weather report. We mention ultraviolet light, the stuff that gives you a sunburn. We mention X-rays and gamma rays, the high-energy photons that can punch through your skin. And we talk about galactic cosmic rays, those heavy atomic nuclei screaming through the vacuum at 90% of the speed of light, shattering DNA like a bullet through a window pane. These are the known killers. We have instruments to measure them, units like sieverts and grays to quantify them, and aluminum hulls designed to stop at least some of them. But the sources suggest a much darker possibility. What if our current technology is like a radio tuned to only one station, while the entire universe is screaming on 1,000 other frequencies? This is the theory of the unmeasurable flux, the idea that deep space is saturated with energies and particles that exist entirely beyond our current ability to measure or detect. Think about the history of science for a moment. There was a time when we didn't know X-rays existed. People sat in front of them, marveling at the strange glow, while their skin began to peel and their hair fell out. They were being murdered by a ghost because they didn't have the eyes to see it. Today we look at deep space and assume we have the full picture because our Geiger counters are clicking. But those counters are only designed to detect what we already know to look for. They look for ionization. They look for specific electromagnetic frequencies. They are calibrated to the physics of Earth. In the deep, dark regions beyond our planet's magnetic bubble, we are finding that our physics might be incomplete. The law vault points to a chilling concept. The human body is reacting to invisible threats that leave no trace on our instruments. We see astronauts returning with cognitive decline, memory impairment, and structural changes in the brain that seem disproportionate to the known radiation doses they received. It's as if they were hit by a secondary, silent bombardment that bypassed every shield we built. Imagine your spacecraft as a medieval castle. You've built thick stone walls to stop the arrows and the catapult stones. You feel safe because you can see the arrows bouncing off the granite. But while you're cheering behind your battlements, a poisonous gas is drifting through the cracks, something your guards don't have a word for, and your eyes can't perceive. By the time you realize something is wrong, the castle of your biological frame has already been compromised from the inside. This unmeasurable flux isn't just a theory, it's a biological mismatch. Our evolution took place inside a protective cocoon. Earth's magnetic field and its thick atmosphere don't just block radiation. They act as a filter that has defined what normal energy looks like for 3 billion years. Our cells have developed repair mechanisms for the kind of damage we find on Earth. UV repair, oxidative stress management, and basic DNA ligases. But we have no defense against energies that don't follow the rules of earthly physics. We are essentially biological outliers. We are fish trying to understand the desert by looking at a cup of salt water. When we step into the deep void, we are exposing ourselves to the full, raw output of a violent and chaotic universe. We are being hit by ghost particles, energies so subtle they pass through lead, water and bone without slowing down, yet so powerful they leave a trail of chemical chaos in their wake. They don't just break a DNA strand, they might be altering the very way our proteins fold, or the way our neurons fire, in ways that our current medical science isn't even looking for. This is why the competitors' focus on known radiation is so dangerous. It provides a false sense of security. They tell you that if we just make the lead walls a little thicker, or if we use water tanks as a storm shelter, we can survive the trip to Mars. But if the unmeasurable flux exists, if there are energies out there that treat lead like a screen door, then shielding is an engineering fallacy. We aren't just fighting a storm, we are trying to stay dry while standing at the bottom of an ocean. The sources indicate that the more we study the long-term effects of the space environment, the more we find anomalous damage. We see cardiovascular deterioration and immune system silencing that doesn't always correlate with the solar cycle or the measured cosmic ray flux. Something else is out there, something that doesn't care about our aluminum hulls or our 5-point harnesses. This leads to the ultimate hard biological limit. If the universe is filled with an unmeasurable, untraceable flux of energy that is fundamentally incompatible with human tissue, then deep space isn't just a challenge to be engineered around, it is a forbidden zone. It suggests that our presence in the stars might be a physical impossibility, not because we lack the fuel or the oxygen, but because our bodies are too loud and too fragile for the subtle, lethal frequencies of the void. When you look at the stars tonight, don't just see the light. Think about the darkness in between. Think about the energies that are passing through you right now, invisible and silent. On Earth, you're safe. The great filter of our atmosphere is holding the ghosts at bay, but out there in the deep, there is no filter. There is only the flux. And the real reason no one can survive deep space is that we are walking into a battlefield where the deadliest weapons are the ones we haven't even learned how to see yet. We are bringing a knife to a fight against a ghost, and the void is simply waiting for us to realize that we've already lost. You are sitting in a small pressurized cabin, surrounded by the hum of life support systems that have become the only heartbeat you recognize. You look out the reinforced window, searching for the one thing that has anchored every human being who has ever lived. But you can't find it. Earth isn't a pale blue dot anymore. It isn't even a bright spark in the distance. It has vanished into the velvet black, leaving you in a place where the very concept of home has been erased from the physical universe. Most people think the greatest psychological threat in space is cabin fever, or the stress of living in close quarters with a small crew. They imagine it's about missing your family or getting annoyed by a co-worker's habits. But there is a much darker, more fundamental terror waiting in the void, something that typical accounts of space travel never mention. It's called the existential isolation effect, and it is the real reason the human mind was never meant to leave the cradle of our atmosphere. Most documentaries and mission reports treat space psychology as a series of manageable hurdles. They talk about stress, interpersonal conflict, and the importance of scheduled recreation. They treat the mind like a machine that just needs a little maintenance to keep running in the dark. But the sources suggest that beyond a certain point of distance, the mind doesn't just get stressed. It begins a process of fundamental, irreversible breakdown. This isn't just about being lonely. It is about the total collapse of the human context. To understand the existential isolation effect, you have to understand what your brain is actually doing right now. For millions of years, human evolution has been tethered to a very specific set of environmental and social cues. Your brain is a highly specialized organ designed to function within a massive, interconnected web of life, gravity, and constant sensory feedback from a planet that is always there. Even when you are alone in a room on Earth, you are part of a world of 8 billion people. A world of weather, seasons, and a horizon. Your mind uses these things as a baseline for reality. When you move into deep space, you aren't just leaving your house, you're cutting the umbilical cord of your own sanity. As Earth recedes and eventually disappears into the background of 1 trillion stars, that baseline is destroyed. You are no longer somewhere, you are nowhere. The sun, which on Earth is a life-giving presence that defines your days, becomes nothing more than a very bright, very cold star in a sky that is always black. This is where the existential isolation effect begins to take hold. It is a theory that suggests the sheer awareness of absolute isolation in the void is not just a psychological burden, but a destructive force that attacks the mind at a fundamental, existential level. On the International Space Station, astronauts are only 250 miles above our heads. They can look out the window and see the clouds, the oceans, and the lights of cities. They are only hours away from a rescue ship if something goes wrong. Their minds are still tethered to the rare oasis, but in deep space that tether is severed. You are millions, eventually billions, of miles away. Communication becomes a ghost of itself. Because of the limitations of the speed of light, a simple hello to mission control can take 20 minutes to arrive, and another 20 minutes for a response to reach you. There is no real-time conversation. Every word you speak is sent into a past that the person on the other end hasn't even reached yet. You are effectively living in a different timeline from the rest of your species. The Law Vault identifies this as a biological mismatch between our evolution and the void. Your brain is not wired for this level of disconnectedness. Without the constant subconscious tug of Earth's presence, the mind begins to turn inward. In the silence of the void, the brain starts to eat itself in a desperate search for context. Studies on Earth-based analogues, people who spend months in isolated habitats, show that even when they know help is just a phone call away, they begin to suffer from memory impairment, reduced problem-solving ability, and a profound sense of unreality. Now imagine that effect multiplied by a factor of 1,000. Imagine knowing that there is no rescue coming. Imagine the crushing weight of the realization that you are a microscopic speck of organic matter floating in an infinite, radioactive ocean that is utterly indifferent to your existence. This isn't just sadness, it is the sensation of your ego being slowly erased by the scale of the universe. The competitor transcripts often ignore this because it's hard to quantify. You can measure bone density loss or radiation levels, but you can't easily measure the moment a human soul decides it is no longer part of the universe. Yet the sources warn that this psychological collapse could be the ultimate hard biological limit that prevents us from ever becoming a true multiplanetary species. Even the most well-selected crew members, individuals chosen for their extreme mental toughness, may reach a breaking point where the mind simply refuses to continue functioning in a vacuum of meaning. We often talk about the engineering fallacy, the idea that if we just build a thicker hull or a faster engine, We can conquer the stars, but you can't engineer a shield against the realization of absolute isolation. You can't build a life support system that provides a sense of belonging to a planet that has become invisible. The real reason no one can survive deep space isn't just that the vacuum will boil your blood or the radiation will shatter your DNA. It's that your mind is a localized phenomenon. It was grown in the soil of Earth, nourished by the light of a specific sun, and stabilized by the presence of other humans. When you take that mind and throw it into the deep, you aren't just challenging it, you are dismantling the very foundations of what it means to be a person. The void doesn't just kill you from the outside in, it kills you from the inside out. It waits until you're far enough away that the pale blue dot is gone, and then it whispers the truth, that you're a biological accident in a place that has no room for you. This existential destruction is the silent gatekeeper of the deep. It is the reason that no matter how much fuel we have, or how many spare parts we carry, the journey into the deep void is not a mission of exploration, but a slow descent into a silence that the human mind was never designed to hear. While we watch the stars and dream of new worlds, we ignore the fact that the most fragile part of our spacecraft isn't the hull, it's the 3 pounds of grey matter inside our skulls, trying desperately to remember what it feels like to stand on a world that actually wants us there. Imagine you're sitting in your favourite chair, perfectly still, feeling absolutely nothing. You feel light, you feel at ease, and you feel safe, but you are currently being crushed. Right now, as you listen to this, you're standing at the bottom of a massive, invisible ocean of gas. You don't feel it, but the weight of the entire column of air above you is pressing down on every single square inch of your skin with a force of 14.7 pounds. For an average adult, that adds up to over 43,000 pounds of total force, more than 20 tons of pressure, roughly the weight of 4 male African elephants constantly trying to squeeze the life out of you. You aren't being flattened into a pancake because your body is pushing back with the exact same intensity. Your blood, your lungs, and every cell in your body are perfectly balanced against this crushing weight. This is your baseline. This is the earthly illusion. The belief that we are independent beings when in reality we are biological prisoners of a planet that is literally holding us together. We always talk about how space will kill us, but we rarely stop to realize that we only exist because Earth is working 24 hours a day to keep the universe from deleting us. Chapter 1. The Earthly Illusion. To understand why deep space is a biological no-go zone, you have to first understand the miracle of the cradle you were born in. Earth is not just a rock spinning in a vacuum. It is a sophisticated, automatic life support system that have been running for billions of years without a single reboot. It provides everything we need: oxygen at exactly 21% concentration, a stable temperature that allows water to remain liquid, and a gravitational pull that keeps our bones from dissolving. But more importantly, it provides a great filter that we take for granted every second of our lives. We live inside a protective cocoon, shielded by a magnetic field that deflects the sun's lethal radiation, and an ozone layer that blocks out the deadly ultraviolet light that would otherwise sizzle our DNA in minutes. The human body is not a universal machine. It is a machine calibrated to exactly 1 atmosphere of pressure. Every biological process you depend on, from the way your heart pumps blood to the way your cells exchange nutrients, assumes that those 20 tons of atmospheric pressure will always be there. Your cardiovascular system is a masterpiece of plumbing, but it is a pressure-balanced system. It pumps blood through your vessels at pressures that are carefully regulated relative to the air around you. Your respiratory system is even more sensitive. Your lungs only function because of pressure gradients. When you inhale, your chest expands to create a lower pressure inside than outside, and the Earth's atmosphere literally pushes the air into your lungs for you. You aren't just breathing, the planet is feeding you. This leads us to the most profound realization of all. Human biology assumes that Earth is the only reality. Our evolution did not prepare us for the universe. It prepared us for a very specific, very rare oasis. We are Earth-calibrated organisms. Our cells operate on a 3 billion-year-old software that doesn't have a backup plan for when the hardware of Earth is removed. This is what researchers call a biological mismatch. We think we can just step into a suit or a spacecraft and carry Earth with us, but the sources suggest that our biology knows the difference. We are essentially localized phenomena. We are like deep-sea fish that have spent their entire existence under the crushing weight of the ocean. If you bring them to the surface, they don't just feel different. They expand and explode because their internal structure is a response to the pressure that is suddenly missing. When we move into deep space, we aren't just traveling to a new location. We are removing the baseline of our existence. Most people think the danger of space is something out there hitting you. An asteroid, a solar flare, or a vacuum. But the primary danger is the removal of the cradle. Without that 14.7 pounds of pressure holding your organs in place, the equilibrium of your life is instantly shattered. Within less than a second of exposure to the void, the gases dissolved in your blood, the nitrogen and oxygen that Earth's pressure keeps tucked neatly into your veins, start to bubble out of solution like a freshly opened bottle of soda. This is ebulism. Your blood begins to foam, your tissues swell as gas expands inside them, and the moisture on your tongue, in your eyes and inside your lungs begins to boil. Not because it's hot, but because the pressure that defines the liquid state had been deleted. This is the reality the successful competitor videos often miss. The fast kill isn't just about the absence of air. It's about the fact that your body is a pressurized vessel that requires the universe to push back against it. We always imagine ourselves as the heroes of the story, conquering the stars with our technology, but physics tells a different story. It tells us that we are fragile, watery bags of organic chemistry that only function because a massive gravity well is holding a blanket of gas against our skin. The law vault describes this as a hard biological limit. We've spent millions of years refining a body that is a perfect match for Earth's specific chemistry and pressure. We have built-in repair mechanisms for the kind of damage we find here: sunburns, infections, and physical injuries. But we have no defense against the total removal of our environment. In deep space, you're not just an explorer. You are a biological outlier in a place that has spent eons perfecting the art of deleting things exactly like you. As we look deeper into this documentary, we have to acknowledge the earthly illusion. We have been fooled by our own success on this planet into thinking that we are universal creatures. We look at the stars and see a destination, but the physics of survival suggests that the stars see us as a mistake to be corrected. The vacuum doesn't have to attack you, it just has to wait for you to leave the protection of your home. The moment you step away from the cradle, the 20 tons of pressure that were holding you together are gone, and your own internal pressure becomes your executioner. This is the baseline. This is the starting point for understanding the real reason no one can survive deep space. It isn't just that the void is empty, it's that we are too earth-heavy to exist without it. We are tethered to this rock by more than just gravity. We are tethered by every chemical reaction in our blood and every breath in our lungs. The journey into the void isn't just a mission of discovery, it is a violent divorce from the only environment that allows our biology to make sense. And as we'll see in the coming chapters, the further we get from the cradle, the more the biological mismatch begins to dismantle the very definition of what it means to be human. This is the story of how our own evolution becomes our greatest enemy the moment we try to leave home. The door is gone, the wall is breached. In an instant, the world you knew, the 20 tons of pressure that was holding your atoms in place, simply stops existing. We spent the last chapter realizing that Earth is a biological cradle, a protective blanket of gas that keeps our internal chemistry stable. But now, the blanket has been ripped away. You are no longer an inhabitant of a planet. You are a pressurized vessel in a zero-pressure environment. Most people think death in space is a slow freezing process. They imagine drifting peacefully into a cold sleep. Physics, however, is far more violent. In the next 60 seconds, your body will undergo a technical and biological collapse so rapid and so total that it redefines the very meaning of the word hostile. This is the physics of failure, and it begins with a countdown that you cannot win. At 0 seconds, the pressure drops from 1 atmosphere to near zero. The immediate effect isn't cold, it's the air rushing out of your body. If you were taught one thing in your life, it was to hold your breath in an emergency. But in the vacuum of space, that instinct is a death sentence. Your lungs at normal pressure contain about 6 liters of air. In a vacuum, that air tries to expand to fill an infinite void. If you hold your breath, your lungs don't just strain, they rupture. The expanding air tears through the delicate, microscopic tissue of your alveoli, forcing air directly into your bloodstream. It is an internal explosion of the respiratory system that happens in the time it takes to blink. To have even a ghost of a chance, you have to exhale, letting the very thing that keeps you alive scream out into the darkness. As the air leaves your lungs, the water in your body begins to realize the rules have changed. On Earth, water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit because the atmosphere is pressing down on it, keeping the molecules in a liquid state. But in the near vacuum of deep space, the boiling point of water drops to body temperature, 98.6 degrees. This is the phenomenon of vapor pressure boiling. It isn't heat that's killing you, it's the lack of weight. Within the first 2 seconds, the saliva on your tongue begins to froth and boil away into gas. The moisture in your eyes begins to evaporate in a violent flash, and the fluid inside your lungs turns into a bubbling foam. You are literally boiling from the inside out, while feeling a strange, freezing sensation in your mouth and nose as the evaporating moisture carries away what little heat you have left. By 5 seconds, the great betrayal of your own blood begins. This is ebulism, the formation of gas bubbles in your bodily fluids. Right now, your blood is full of dissolved gases, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. On Earth, atmospheric pressure keeps these gases tucked into your liquid blood, much like a closed bottle of soda keeps its carbonation. But when you remove the cap of the universe, those gases scream to get out. Your blood begins to foam. Bubbles of nitrogen and oxygen form inside your arteries, your veins, and your heart. These aren't small bubbles. They are massive blockages that turn your smooth liquid circulatory system into a chaotic slurry of gas and foam. At 10 seconds, your body begins to lose its shape. Because the internal pressure of your tissues is now far greater than the zero pressure of the void, your body starts to expand. You aren't going to explode like in a bad horror movie. Human skin is remarkably tough and elastic, but you will swell. Within seconds, you will visibly bloat, your tissues expanding until you are nearly twice your normal size. Your skin stretches to its absolute limit, becoming a taut pressurized balloon made of bone and meat. This swelling isn't just external, it is happening in your organs, your muscles, and your brain. By 15 seconds, the lights go out. Your brain is a metabolic furnace, consuming 20% of your body's oxygen, despite being only 2% of your weight. It requires a constant, high-pressure flow of oxygenated blood to maintain consciousness. But your lungs are empty, and your blood is no longer a liquid. It's a foam that cannot carry oxygen. In about 10 to 15 seconds, the last of the oxygenated blood that was already in your brain is spent. Your vision narrows into a pinprick. Your hearing fades into a dull hum, and you collapse into unconsciousness. This is the only mercy the physics of space offers. You won't be awake for what happens next. At 30 seconds, while you're drifting in a state of blacked-out biological shock, your heart is still desperately trying to do its job, but it's no longer pumping blood. It's pumping a froth of gas and liquid that provides no nutrients to your cells. Your blood pressure becomes erratic and then collapses as the circulatory system fails to maintain any kind of rhythm in the face of the expanding gas bubbles. Every organ in your body is now screaming in a biological mismatch that it cannot resolve. The internal vacuum created by your own cell's oxygen hunger is pulling the last remnants of life out of your tissue. By 60 seconds, the damage crosses the threshold of no return. Even if you are somehow snatched from the void and placed back into a pressurized room at this very second, you would likely never be the same. Your brain, starved of oxygen for nearly a minute while being pressurized by internal swelling, begins to suffer irreversible neurological impairment. The bubbles in your blood have likely caused silent strokes and tissue death in your most vital organs. At 1 minute, you are effectively a ghost. Your heart might still give a few irregular, weak thumps, but for all intents and purposes, the machine of the human body has broken down catastrophically. Most people talk about space as a place of infinite possibility, but in the first 60 seconds of exposure, you realize it is actually a place of infinite unmaking. The universe doesn't have to use a weapon to kill you. It just has to remove the one environment that makes your existence possible. By the end of this first minute, your blood is a foam, your lungs are shredded, your body is a swollen caricature of itself, and your brain has gone dark. clinical death follows within another minute. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no hope. This is the immediate hostility of the vacuum. It is a rapid-fire technical failure that proves we are not universal beings. We are one atmosphere creatures. We are built for the cradle, and the moment we leave it without a suit, the physics of the universe treats us like an error in the code that needs to be deleted. You have just experienced the first 60 seconds of the real reason no one can survive deep space. Not because we aren't brave, but because we are physically, chemically, and biologically incompatible with the silence of the stars. If you manage to survive the first 60 seconds of exposure, if you are pulled back into a pressurized cabin just as your vision was fading and your blood was beginning to foam, you might think the worst was over. You would be wrong. The vacuum is the monster that screams in your face. It is a violent, immediate threat that we can at least understand and measure. But as we move deeper into the void, we encounter a much more sinister killer, one that doesn't care about your airlock or your oxygen tanks. This is the slow break. It is an invisible, silent bombardment that begins the moment you leave the protective magnetic bubble of Earth and doesn't stop until your very blueprint is dismantled. We are talking about galactic cosmic rays, and they represent a biological barrier that we might never be able to cross. Even if the vacuum doesn't get you, the universe has another way to ensure you don't belong in the deep. While you're floating in your spacecraft, feeling safe behind a few millimeters of aluminum, you're being pierced by particles moving at nearly the speed of light. These are not the rays of light you see from the sun. These are galactic cosmic rays, atomic nuclei, mostly protons, but also heavy elements like iron, that have been accelerated by the most violent events in the cosmos, such as supernova explosions, to nearly 90% of the speed of light. On Earth, we are protected from this barrage by a massive magnetic field and a thick atmosphere that deflects or absorbs these high-speed bullets before they ever reach our skin. But in deep space, there is no filter. Imagine these particles not as light, but as microscopic cannonballs traveling at 160,000 miles per second. Because they're so energetic, they don't just hit you, they pass through you. And as they pass through your body, they don't just damage a cell here or there, they shatter the molecular bonds of your DNA like a bullet through a window pane. This is the invisible threat, a constant, relentless destruction of your genetic code that your body simply wasn't evolved to repair. On Earth, your cells are used to a slow pace of damage from natural background radiation, and they have sophisticated repair mechanisms to fix occasional breaks. But in the deep void, the flux of radiation is hundreds of times higher than it is on the ground. Your repair mechanisms are quickly overwhelmed, and the errors in your blueprint begin to accumulate. But the slow break is even more terrifying than a single particle strike. When one of these heavy iron nuclei hits the metal hull of your spacecraft, or even the calcium in your own bones, it doesn't always stop. Instead, it undergoes a process called spallation. The high-energy cosmic ray shatters the nucleus of whatever it hits, creating a cascade or a shower of secondary particles, neutrons, protons, and other fragments that spray out like shrapnel from an explosion. This means that your own spacecraft's shielding, or even your own skeleton, can actually become a source of secondary radiation, multiplying the damage to your soft tissues. You are not just being hit from the outside, you are being shredded from the inside, by a radioactive shrapnel created by the very particles that were supposed to pass right through you. This internal bombardment focuses on the most sensitive parts of your biology. While the vacuum attacks your lungs, radiation attacks your future. It destroys the cellular machinery that allows your body to function. Over weeks and months, this leads to a steady, irreversible deterioration that scientists are only beginning to understand. We see it in the cardiovascular system, where radiation damage to the lining of the blood vessels can lead to early onset heart disease. We see it in the eyes, where cosmic rays can cause cataracts to form as they cloud the lenses of people who should be in the prime of their lives. But perhaps most disturbingly, we see it in the brain. Recent studies and obscure theories suggest that this unmeasurable flux of cosmic energy can actually alter the physical structure of your brain. Astronauts returning from long-duration missions have shown signs of cognitive decline, memory impairment, and a reduced ability to solve complex problems. It's as if the high-energy particles are pruning the neural connections in your mind, causing a slow-motion cognitive collapse. Imagine being on a 2-year mission to Mars, and by the time you arrive, you no longer have the mental sharpness required to land the ship or handle an emergency. The slow break isn't just killing your body, it is dismantling the person you used to be, one neuron at a time. This creates what we call the engineering paradox of deep space. The common sense solution to radiation is to add more shielding, thick walls of lead or aluminum. But as we've seen, thick metal can actually make the radiation worse by creating more secondary particle showers. To truly block galactic cosmic rays, you would need meters of water or heavy shielding that is simply too heavy to launch into space with our current rockets. We are trapped in a biological mismatch. Our bodies require massive protection that our technology cannot yet provide. We are Earth-calibrated organisms trying to exist in a radioactive desert, and the universe is using the laws of physics to tell us that we don't belong here. The sources suggest that there may even be unknown forms of cosmic radiation that our current instruments can't even detect, energies that are bypassing our sensors and causing biological damage we haven't even named yet. This would mean that even our best estimates of safe radiation doses are fundamentally flawed. We are walking into a storm with an umbrella that is full of holes, and we are pretending that we're staying dry. This is why the slow break is the real gatekeeper of the stars. You can build a suit to hold in the air, and you can build a tank to hold the oxygen, but you cannot build a shield that protects the fundamental integrity of your DNA from a universe that is screaming at the speed of light. The real reason no one can survive deep space is that the void doesn't just want to take your breath away, it wants to unmake you at the atomic level. It is a slow, relentless process of biological decay that ensures that even if you have the courage to leave the cradle of Earth, you will eventually arrive at your destination as a ghost of the person who left. We are biological accidents of a very specific shielded environment, and the invisible threat is the universe's way of reminding us that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed. Imagine you're standing inside a state-of-the-art spacecraft, millions of miles from home. You're surrounded by humming electronics, thick insulation, and a hull built by the world's greatest engineers. Your sensors show green across the board, The radiation monitors are steady, the oxygen levels are perfect, and you feel a sense of security. But what if those sensors are lying to you? Not because they're broken, but because they are blind. Imagine a threat so subtle that it passes through lead walls as if they were made of tissue paper, yet so precise that it can snip a single strand of your DNA while you sleep. We call these the ghost particles. While we've spent decades mapping the known radiation of the cosmos, the sources suggest that the real killer is the energy we haven't even learned how to measure yet. Most documentaries will tell you that the primary radiation threat in space comes from two things: solar flares and galactic cosmic rays. They show you graphics of heavy iron nuclei screaming through the void at 90% the speed of light, and they tell you that we have a solution: shielding. But here is the terrifying reality of space engineering. The hull of the International Space Station and almost every deep space vessel currently on the drawing board is only about 3 millimeters thick. That is roughly 1/8 of an inch of aluminum, less than the thickness of a few stacked credit cards. This thin shell is all that stands between your biology and the raw fury of the universe. The competitor transcripts focus on how this aluminum can stop some particles, but they ignored the engineering fallacy. In the deep void, a thick metal shield can actually be more dangerous than no shield at all. When a high-energy cosmic ray hits a heavy metal hull, it doesn't always stop. Instead, it shatters the atoms of the shield itself, creating a cascade or a shower of secondary particles, neutrons and protons that spray into the cabin like microscopic shrapnel. This means your very protection becomes a source of secondary radiation, turning your spacecraft into a radioactive furnace that is cooking you from the inside out. But the ghost particles represent a mystery that goes even deeper than secondary shrapnel. The law vault and the sources point to the existence of unknown forms of cosmic radiation that exist entirely beyond our current ability to measure or detect. Think about our current scientific instruments as a radio tuned to only one specific station. We can hear the static of X-rays and the loud signal of protons because we built our machines to find them. But the universe is a vast ancient symphony playing on 1,000 different frequencies. We are essentially stepping into a battlefield where the deadliest weapons are the ones we don't have: the eyes to see. This is the unmeasurable flux. It is a theory that space is saturated with subtle, high-penetration energies that treat our current shielding like a screen door. These particles don't always trigger a Geiger counter because they don't ionize matter in the way we expect. Instead, they interact with the delicate quantum structures of your cells. They might be the reason why astronauts return with anomalous damage, cognitive decline, and cardiovascular deterioration that doesn't always match the known radiation doses they received. It's as if they were hit by a silent, invisible tide that bypassed every alarm in the ship. To understand why this is a biological mismatch, you have to realize that your body is not just a collection of organs. It is a highly tuned chemical engine that evolved inside a filter. Earth's magnetic field and thick atmosphere don't just block radiation. They act as a great filter that defines what energy is allowed to touch us. For 3 billion years, our cells have only had to deal with the low-energy leftovers of the cosmos. Our DNA repair mechanisms are designed to fix the slow, predictable damage of earthly life. We have no biological backup software for particles that strike at the speed of light, or energies that vibrate on frequencies our evolution has never encountered. Imagine your DNA as a library of ancient, priceless books. On Earth, the weather is mild. Occasionally, a book gets a little dusty or a page gets a small tear, and the librarian, your cellular repair system, easily fixes it. But in the deep void, it's like a hurricane has ripped the roof off the library. High-energy particles are blowing through the shelves, shredding whole volumes of your genetic code. And the ghost particles, they are like an invisible ink that slowly erases the words while the books are still on the shelf. You don't even know the information is missing until the cell tries to read the instructions and finds nothing but a blank page. This is the slow break mentioned in the sources, the realization that space doesn't just kill you quickly, it dismantles the very definition of who you are over months and years. We see this in the way cosmic radiation affects the central nervous system. Studies on animals exposed to cosmic ray analogues show actual changes in brain structure and memory impairment. If a human is exposed to the unmeasurable flux for long enough, the person who arrives at a distant planet might not be the same person who left Earth. Their memories could be fragmented, their personality altered, and their ability to solve the very problems required for their survival could be pruned away by the invisible bombardment. The sources suggest that we are currently in an engineering paradox. We want to go to the stars, but to truly protect a human from the full spectrum of cosmic energy, including the ghost particles, we would need shielding that is meters thick, perhaps made of vast tanks of water or massive layers of lead. But the rocket equation is merciless. Every extra kilogram of shielding requires more fuel, and more fuel requires more fuel to lift that fuel. We are trapped in a reality where we can only afford to send humans in thin-walled balloons that offer almost zero protection against the true fury of the deep. The real reason no one can survive deep space isn't just because the vacuum is empty. It's because the emptiness is actually full of things we cannot see. We are trying to cross an ocean of ghosts in a boat made of paper. We have mapped the visible monsters, but we are completely blind to the silent ones that are already passing through your chest as you look at the stars. The ghost particles are the ultimate gatekeepers. They remind us that the universe is not just a place we haven't visited yet. It is an environment that is fundamentally, energetically, and biologically incompatible with our very existence. Until we learn how to see the invisible, the deep void will remain a forbidden zone where our technology is nothing more than a hollow defense against a silent executioner. We've spent the last few chapters looking out the reinforced windows of our spacecraft, staring into the face of the external monsters, the vacuum that wants to boil your blood, and the invisible radiation that wants to shatter your DNA. But as you float in the silence of the void, there is a much more intimate threat you haven't considered. You aren't alone in that suit. You have brought billions of hitchhikers with you. Right now, inside your own cells, there is an ancient, invisible army that has been with you since the day you were born. On Earth, they are silent, kept in a state of permanent lockdown by the most sophisticated security force in the known universe, your immune system. But the moment you cross the threshold into deep space, the security force doesn't just get tired, it begins to mutiny. This is the traitor within, the internal collapse that ensures even if you survive the vacuum and the ghosts of radiation, your own body will eventually finish the job. To understand why your own biology turns against you in the deep, you have to realize that your immune system is a product of 3 billion years of relentless terrestrial warfare. Every white blood cell, every T cell, and every antibody in your body is a veteran of a battlefield governed by very specific rules, earthly rules. Your immune system is not a static shield. It is a highly tuned sensor array that relies on the constant, subconscious cues of gravity and atmospheric pressure to maintain its edge. When you remove those cues, you aren't just entering a new environment. You're causing a total communication breakdown in your biological defense network. The sources identify a phenomenon that researchers are only beginning to grasp: the great silence of the human immune system in space. On Earth, your immune cells are in constant high-speed communication. They are like an elite strike force, always tagging, identifying, and neutralizing threats. But in the environment of deep space, that network begins to lag. Studies indicate that T cells, the generals of your internal army, undergo a catastrophic failure in microgravity. They become sluggish and confused. In some cases, they simply stop responding to signals that would normally trigger an immediate defensive strike. It's as if the security guards in your biological fortress have decided to lay down their weapons and stop watching the monitors. This is where the traitor narrative becomes a terrifying reality. You carry within you what the Law Vault calls the sleeping giants, dormant viruses like herpes, Epstein-Barr, and varicella zoster, the virus that causes shingles. On Earth, these viruses are locked in a subterranean vault within your nerve cells. They are there, embedded in your very tissue, but they are powerless because your immune system keeps the door barred 24 hours a day. But these viruses are ancient. They've evolved to sense weakness, and deep space is the ultimate signal of vulnerability. As your T cells enter the great silence and your immune defenses weaken, these dormant infections sense the shift in your internal chemistry. They realize the guard is no longer at the door. In the isolated, high radiation environment millions of miles from the nearest hospital, these viruses begin a coordinated jailbreak. They don't just return, they thrive in a body that has lost its ability to say no. Imagine being trapped in a thin-walled tin can halfway to another planet, and your own body begins to break out in systemic viral flares, shingles, cold sores, and internal inflammation that your medicine can't suppress because your own biology has forgotten how to fight. This internal collapse is part of the larger biological mismatch we have been exploring. Your immune system isn't just a shield, it's a localized phenomenon. It was grown in the soil of Earth, and it requires the tether of Earth's specific environment to remain stable. When you venture into the deep, you are essentially committing biological treason against yourself. The stress of microgravity, combined with the relentless bombardment of cosmic radiation, creates a perfect storm inside your organs. Some parts of your immune system might become hyper-inflammatory, attacking your own healthy tissue in a confused attempt to find an enemy it can no longer see, while the critical cells needed to fight actual infections simply give up. This leads to a chilling realization that the successful competitor videos completely ignored. You cannot engineer a suit for your immune system. You can build a hull to keep the air in, and you can build a shield to stop the particles, but you cannot build a life support system that provides the millions of years of evolutionary stability your cells need to keep the sleeping giants in their vault. We are trying to force an earthbound organism to exist in a universe that is essentially a desert of biological meaning. The real reason no one can survive deep space is that you cannot take the cradle with you. You can take the oxygen and the water, but you cannot take the biological authority that Earth exerts over your internal hitchhikers. When you leave the atmosphere, you are handing the keys to your fortress over to the very things that want to destroy you. The vacuum will boil your saliva, and the radiation will shatter your DNA. But it is the traitor within, your own collapsing immune system, that ensures you are a biological outlier in a place that has no room for you. By the time you reach the midpoint of a deep space journey, your body is no longer a temple. It is a battleground where the enemy has already bypassed the gates. Your own cells are ignoring the cancerous mutations being triggered by the ghost particles, and your ancient viruses are reclaiming the territory they lost billions of years ago. This internal mutiny is the silent gatekeeper of the stars. It is the hard biological limit that suggests we were never meant to leave the protection of our home world. While we look at the stars and dream of colonization, we are ignoring the fact that our own biology is the ultimate no-fly zone. You are walking into the dark with a traitor in your chest, and the void is simply waiting for the moment your internal defenses go silent to let the monsters out. This is the 5th chapter of our collapse, the moment we realize that the most dangerous thing in space isn't the vacuum or the radiation. It's the reflections in the mirror. Imagine you're standing in a small pressurized cabin, surrounded by the hum of life support systems that have become the only heartbeat you recognize. You look out the reinforced window, searching for the one thing that has anchored every human being who has ever lived. But you can't find it. Earth isn't a pale blue dot anymore. It isn't even a bright spark in the distance. It has vanished into the velvet black, leaving you in a place where the very concept of home has been erased from the physical universe. Most people think the greatest psychological threat in space is cabin fever, or the stress of living in close quarters with a small crew. They imagine it's about missing your family or getting annoyed by a co-worker's habits. But there is a much darker, more fundamental terror waiting in the void, something that typical accounts of space travel never mention. It's called the existential isolation effect, and it is the real reason the human mind was never meant to leave the cradle of our atmosphere. The existential isolation effect, the competitor treats psychology as stress and interpersonal conflict. It fails to address the existential isolation effect, a theory that the sheer awareness of absolute isolation in the void is not just stressful, but psychologically destructive to the human mind at a fundamental existential level. Most documentaries and mission reports treat space psychology as a series of manageable hurdles. They talk about stress, interpersonal conflict, and the importance of scheduled recreation. They treat the mind like a machine that just needs a little maintenance, a video call home or a favourite meal to keep running in the dark. But the sources suggest that beyond a certain point of distance, the mind doesn't just get stressed, it begins a process of fundamental, irreversible break down. This isn't just about being lonely, it is about the total collapse of the human context. To understand the existential isolation effect, you have to understand what your brain is actually doing right now. For millions of years, human evolution has been tethered to a very specific set of environmental and social cues. Your brain is a highly specialized organ designed to function within a massive, interconnected web of life, gravity, and constant sensory feedback from a planet that is always there. Even when you are alone in a room on Earth, you are part of a world of 8 billion people, a world of weather, seasons, and a horizon. Your mind uses these things as a baseline for reality. When you move into deep space, you aren't just leaving your house. You are cutting the umbilical cord of your own sanity. As Earth recedes and eventually disappears into the background of 1 trillion stars, that baseline is destroyed. You are no longer somewhere. You are nowhere. The sun, which on Earth is a life-giving presence that defines your days, becomes nothing more than a very bright, very cold star in a sky that is always black. This is where the existential isolation effect begins to take hold. It is a theory that suggests the sheer awareness of absolute isolation in the void is not just a psychological burden, but a destructive force that attacks the mind at a fundamental existential level. On the International Space Station, astronauts are only 250 miles above our heads. They can look out the window and see the clouds, the oceans, and the lights of cities. They are only hours away from a rescue ship if something goes wrong. Their minds are still tethered to the rare oasis, but in deep space, that tether is severed. You are millions, eventually billions, of miles away. Communication becomes a ghost of itself. Because of the limitations of the speed of light, a simple hello to mission control can take 20 minutes to arrive, and another 20 minutes for a response to reach you. There is no real-time conversation. Every word you speak is sent into a past that the person on the other end hasn't even reached yet. You are effectively living in a different timeline from the rest of your species. The Law Vault and scientific reports identify this as a biological mismatch between our evolution and the void. Your brain is not wired for this level of disconnectedness. Without the constant subconscious tug of Earth's presence, the mind begins to turn inward. In the silence of the void, the brain starts to eat itself in a desperate search for context. Studies on Earth-based analogues, people who spend months in isolated habitats, show that even when they know help is just a phone call away, they begin to suffer from memory impairment, reduced problem-solving ability, and a profound sense of unreality. Now imagine that effect multiplied by a factor of 1,000. Imagine knowing that there is no rescue coming. Imagine the crushing weight of the realization that you are a microscopic speck of organic matter floating in an infinite radioactive ocean that is utterly indifferent to your existence. This isn't just sadness, it is the sensation of your ego being slowly erased by the scale of the universe. The competitor transcripts often ignore this because it's hard to quantify. You can measure bone density loss or radiation levels, but you can't easily measure the moment a human soul decides it is no longer part of the universe. Yet the sources warn that this psychological collapse could be the ultimate hard biological limit that prevents us from ever becoming a true multiplanetary species. Even the most Well-selected crew members, individuals chosen for their extreme mental toughness, may reach a breaking point where the mind simply refuses to continue functioning in a vacuum of meaning. In this state of existential decay, the monotony of the spacecraft becomes a weapon. The same sounds, the same smells, and the same four walls for months on end. On Earth, we have the great filter of the atmosphere to provide variety, but in space you are trapped in an artificial loop. The mind, starved for new sensory input, may begin to hallucinate or develop deep-seated paranoias. Conflicts with crewmates, which would be minor on Earth, become life-threatening crises in the pressure cooker of a deep space vessel. We often talk about the engineering fallacy, the idea that if we just build a thicker hull or a faster engine, we can conquer the stars. But you can't engineer a shield against the realization of absolute isolation. You can't build a life support system that provides a sense of belonging to a planet that has become invisible. The real reason no one can survive deep space isn't just that the vacuum will boil your blood or the radiation will shatter your DNA. It's that your mind is a localized phenomenon. It was grown in the soil of Earth, nourished by the light of a specific sun, and stabilized by the presence of other humans. When you take that mind and throw it into the deep, you aren't just challenging it. You are dismantling the very foundations of what it means to be a person. The void doesn't just kill you from the outside in, it kills you from the inside out. It waits until you're far enough away that the pale blue dot is gone, and then it whispers the truth, that you are a biological accident in a place that has no room for you. This existential destruction is the silent gatekeeper of the deep. It is the reason that no matter how much fuel we have or how many spare parts we carry, the journey into the deep void is not just a mission of exploration, but a slow descent into a silence that the human mind was never designed to hear. While we watch the stars and dream of new worlds, we ignore the fact that the most fragile part of our spacecraft isn't the hull. It's the 3 pounds of grey matter inside our skulls, trying desperately to remember what it feels like to stand on a world that actually wants us there. As you float in the pressurized silence of your cabin, you might feel a strange, creeping sensation that has nothing to do with the vacuum outside. You look out the window, searching for the one thing that has anchored every human soul for 300,000 years, but you can't find it. Earth isn't a pale blue dot anymore. It has vanished into the velvet black, leaving you in a place where the very concept of home has been erased from the physical universe. Most people think the greatest psychological threat in space is cabin fever, or the stress of living in close quarters, but there is a much darker, more fundamental terror waiting in the void. It's called the existential isolation effect, and it is the point where the human mind breaks because it can no longer tether itself to the only reality it has ever known. For millions of years, your brain has been calibrated to a world of 8 billion people, seasons, weather, and a constant horizon. Even when you're alone on Earth, you're part of a massive, interconnected web of life and gravity that provides a subconscious baseline for your sanity. But in deep space, that baseline is deleted. Beyond the moon, you enter a psychological no man's land, where the sun becomes just another cold, bright star, and the Earth becomes a memory. Communication becomes a ghost of itself. Because of the speed of light, a simple message to mission control can take 20 minutes to arrive and another 20 minutes to return. There are no real-time conversations, no immediate help, and no sense of belonging. In this silence, the brain starts to eat itself as it searches for the environmental cues it evolved to require. Studies on Earth-based analogues show that this level of disconnectedness leads to memory impairment, reduced problem-solving ability, and a profound sense of unreality that even the most well-selected crew members might not survive. The void doesn't just kill you from the outside, it waits until you're far enough away that the cradle is gone, and then it dismantles the very foundations of what it means to be a person. This psychological fragility is matched only by the physical fragility of the machines we build to protect us. We like to think of our spacecraft as fortresses of technology, but in reality, they are fragile, thin-walled balloons. To escape Earth's gravity, engineers have to follow the merciless rocket equation, which dictates that every kilogram of mass requires an exponential amount of fuel. Because mass is the enemy, spacecraft walls are shaved down to the absolute minimum, often just 3 millimeters of aluminum or composite material. That is roughly 1/8 of an inch, about the thickness of a few stacked credit cards, standing between your lungs and the infinite vacuum. This thin hull is all that protects you from the debris of the cosmos. At orbital velocities of 17,500 miles per hour, even a tiny paint flake has enough kinetic energy to chip a window or puncture a hull. This is the engineering fallacy, the belief that we can solve the hostility of space with better metal. We use Whipple shields, layers of material spaced apart, to shatter incoming micrometeorites. But there is a limit to what they can stop. Anything larger than 10 centimeters is currently untrackable and could cause catastrophic depressurization in seconds. Furthermore, our shielding can actually make the environment more lethal. When high-energy cosmic rays hit a heavy metal hull, they shatter the atoms of the shield itself, creating a secondary cascade of radiation shrapnel that sprays into the cabin and shreds your DNA. We are trying to cross a radioactive ocean in a boat made of paper, and our very attempt to build thicker walls only creates more invisible bullets that we cannot stop. This brings us to the central mystery of our era, the hard biological limit. Is there a point where human biology simply says, no more? The evidence suggests that we are not universal creatures, but biological outliers. Our bodies are Earth-calibrated machines that require 14.7 pounds of pressure to keep our blood from foaming, and a massive magnetic field to keep our cells from mutating. When we leave that protection, we aren't just entering a new environment, we are experiencing a total biological mismatch. In deep space, your immune system enters a great silence, your bones leach minerals into your blood, and your cardiovascular system loses its shape. We have no evolutionary software for an environment with no gravity and constant radiation. The theory of unknown biological limits suggests that the human frame has a timer that starts the moment we leave the atmosphere. We see it in the vision problems caused by fluid shifts and the cognitive decline triggered by cosmic ray bombardment. We are essentially trying to run a 3 billion-year-old biological program on hardware that was never meant to leave the cradle. The further we go, the more the universe treats us like an error in the code that needs to be deleted. We can visit the void briefly with extensive support, but the idea of routinely living in deep space is currently a scientific impossibility. The final realization is that Earth is not just a planet we live on. It is a rare oasis in a merciless universe. We often dream of escaping to Mars or the moons of Jupiter to ensure the survival of our species, but those worlds are incomprehensibly hostile, requiring constant, high-tech life support that can fail at any moment. Mars has less than 1% of our atmospheric pressure, lethal radiation, and dust storms that can last for months. Interstellar travel would take tens of thousands of years with our current technology, requiring generations of humans to be born and die in the silence of the void. The real reason no one can survive deep space isn't because our rockets aren't fast enough, but because we are biologically tethered to Earth. We have evolved to fit this specific, precious environment in a way we don't fit anywhere else in the known universe. From the 20 tons of pressure holding us together to the magnetic field shielding our DNA, Earth is doing the heavy lifting of survival for us every second. Our survival depends not on our ability to flee into the vacuum, but on our ability to protect the cradle. Space is magnificent and worthy of study, but it is also a place that doesn't negotiate. It is governed by the cold laws of physics, laws that say you have less than 2 minutes to live if you step outside. As we look up at the stars, we must remember that the most remarkable thing about the universe isn't the infinite blackness, but the thin, fragile shell of atmosphere that keeps us alive in the middle of it. We are children of the oasis, and the void is a reminder of how precious home really is.